10th standard ICSE, English literature, the fifth story. I'm going to call it story 10, The Last Lesson. It's by a French novelist, Alphonse Daudet. It's a short story set in the backdrop of Franco-Prussian War. Prussia is a modern-day Germany, a part of it. This war precedes the First World War. It happened in the 19th century, where Prussia had captured France. And not only was it a military war, but also a cultural war. The French language was being banned from being taught in schools in France, and German was being imposed in the conquered territories. Now, this is narrated from the innocent perspective of a boy, Franz. The children as well as the adults have procrastinated, postponed learning their language, thinking that they had ample amount of time to do so. A lot of time. So less importance is given to our own native language. But they regret this after M. Hamel gives them the last lesson in the French language, because he wasn't allowed to teach it any further, and impresses upon them how studying their language would come to their rescue in times of crisis when their identity is threatened. Because sooner or later the war will end, one way or the other. But if they give up on holding on to their value systems, their culture, their language, then they would be defeated. Their culture will be extinct. But using your language, no matter where you are, it preserves your culture in some way or the other, no matter who's ruling that country. Even today, when people settle abroad, many of them still use their native tongue to communicate, because they like to stay in touch with their roots. And the importance of that is highlighted in this story. Let's study the story in detail. The story begins on a beautiful day in a village in the 19th century, Alsace region of France. That's the region which was captured by Prussia. You will study about Alsace and Lorraine during the First World War as well, in history. Now, a young schoolboy, Franz, is in a hurry to go to his school. He is scared because he has not learned the lesson on participles. That's a topic in grammar that was assigned by his stern teacher, Monsieur Hamel, Mr. Hamel. He resists the temptation to bunk school. He wanted to just explore nature and waste the day rather than going to school, but then he decided ultimately, let's go to school. He had no idea that it was Monsieur Hamel's last lecture. He had this temptation to roam outdoors where the Prussian soldiers were drilling. That is, marching and preparing. Now, Franz passes the town hall and sees a crowd gathered around the bulletin board. He had no clue what was mentioned on the bulletin board. Often important news about the war or some rules and regulations implemented were mentioned. So Franz thinks that something must be wrong. He's aware that the bulletin board was used by the Prussian forces to give their commands to the French villagers of Alsace. But Franz does not have time to stop and find out. He rushes and finally reaches his school. So yeah, what was mentioned on the bulletin board was regarding French being banned from being taught in schools in those captured regions. He is surprised to find an unusual silence with no commotion that normally marks the beginning of the day at school. Franz, through the window, sees his teacher pacing up and down with his ruler under his arm, and his classmates are at their seats in the classroom. To his surprise, instead of reprimanding or scolding Franz for being late to school, his teacher speaks to him kindly, after all it's his last lecture, and simply asks him to take his seat. Franz notices that his teacher is wearing a beautiful green coat, a shirt with frills, and an embroidered black silk cap, clothes which he usually wears on special occasions, and it was indeed his farewell, so it was a special occasion. To his surprise, he sees many villagers, including old Hauser, the former mayor, he was a mayor earlier, the former postmaster, and many others sitting at the back benches of the classroom. They were all here to bid farewell to Monsieur Hamel and to appreciate his services for so many years. As he tries to make sense of it all, the Monsieur Hamel makes a shocking announcement. He tells them that it will be their last French lesson, as the teaching of French has been banned under orders from the Prussian authorities, and they will have to study German instead. Franz is shocked to hear this. He realizes that this must have been the news that had been posted on the bulletin board outside the town hall. The knowledge that he would have to stop learning his own language, which he has hardly begun to learn, gives him a new understanding about his language and makes him appreciate it. He regrets the time he spent procrastinating, dilly-dallying, whenever it came to learning French or doing homework. The moment that France has dreaded, has been scared of, has arrived. Now, in the morning, he was going to bunk school because he had not studied participles, but now he'll have to talk about those rules. He is called upon by his teacher to recite the grammatical rules he was meant to learn about participles. Franz stumbles and stammers, he's not confident. But instead of scolding him, his teacher lectures the gathered crowd on the evils of neglecting their education. It is this neglect, he says, that now enables the Prussian invaders to question the villagers' French identity. The Prussians would mock the French villagers. How can the villagers claim to be French when they don't even know their own language properly? He tells them that they had plenty of time to learn. But still, they did not learn it because it's a problem with Alsace that it is left for tomorrow. Procrastination. Education is something you should acquire whenever you get time. You should never delay it. Monsieur Hamel goes on to describe the beauty of the French language, telling the class that they must guard it carefully, as it is the key to their freedom. Because people can imprison your body, but they cannot imprison your mind. He explains the grammar lessons to the class, and Franz now finds himself listening more attentively than ever, being the last lesson. For the lesson in writing, Monsieur Hamel makes the class write the words France, Alsace repeatedly in an attempt to make them learn it by heart. Everyone in the room applies themselves to the exercise with diligence and concentration. The cooing of the pigeons, the noise that they make on the roof, makes Franz wonder whether the Germans will make the birds too sing in German, which is impossible. This shows that not everything can be controlled simply by authority and power. Some things are still in the control of our own mind. And such thinking boosts our morale against injustice. Now the church bell strikes 12, and the sound of the trumpets of the Prussian soldiers mark the end of their drilling exercises. It also signals the end of the last lesson. Hamel is fraught with grief, he's sad. He's unable to speak, so he turns to the blackboard and writes in large letters, Vive la France, meaning long live France. With a gesture of his hand, he dismisses the class. Perhaps his eyes were moist, and he did not want to show it. He was very emotional because he had been teaching there at that very spot for the last 40 years. And now his sister was packing up the suitcases upstairs where he lived. Because he had to leave the country the very next day. He also felt a little guilty that even he had delayed his lessons sometimes when instead of teaching, he had assigned some task, some chores, his personal work to the students. But the theme of this story is about patriotism, love for your own country, your own culture. Hi students, this is AJ sir. If you found this video useful, press the like button. Also, if you'd like to enroll for my test series or online lectures, email me or message me on Instagram. Check my description for more information.